The river below the Shaolin cliffs never froze. Even in the coldest months, it moved with a cold-minded purpose, swallowing wood, stone, and sometimes lives. It threaded the valley like a wound, a place that marked the station of the monastery as much as any bell or flag. For monk Zhao Ren, that river became the measuring stick of his devotion, the place where he tested limits and punished himself for failures he could neither forget nor forgive. Zhao Ren trained there every night. He walked the cliff path with the steadiness of someone who had made suffering a ritual. When he arrived, he set his shoulders and faced the iron poles hammered into the ground like obscene priests. He slammed his forearms again and again until skin split and numbness spread like lacquer. Iron body training was a discipline of transformation. Flesh hardened, joints adapted, pain dissolved into utility. The elders warned him that obsession could hollow a person out, that turning life into a project might cost what made life worth protecting. Zhao Ren had heard it, but there was a blank space where those warnings should land. Pain, for him, meant progress. Pain reminded him he was still alive. Years earlier, he had a younger training brother named Wei. Where Zhao Ren had favored endurance and the gradual grinding of will, Wei had favored speed and breath. He moved like a question, always curious, always just out of reach. They had been a pair that balanced one another the way tide and shore do. Then, during cliff training one winter, Wei slipped. Zhao Ren reached and felt the world contort. The strain in his fingers, the way tendons screamed as if betraying a harmony, the sudden animal fear that propels a person into action without thought. He grabbed him, he thought he had. He felt bone strain and tendon shock. Then, as if under someone else's control, he let go. Not wholly, not fully. But the grip that mattered failed. Wei fell and vanished into the river below. No body turned up. No skeletal evidence came ashore. The river hid him as it hid so many things. From that night, Zhao Ren turned training into exile. He trained until feeling left his life like breath in a long practice, regular, distant, necessary. It was an order that pulled him back from the sheer edge of ritual into a world that still demanded action. One winter evening, the abbot summoned him alone. The abbot was an unhurried man with the look of someone who had kept too many balances to be surprised by much. He said the monastery's words and none of the poetry. A mercenary clan had been hunting monks across the mountains. They sold Shaolin techniques to the highest bidder, teaching killing where once there had been discipline. The leader of that clan had a reputation, called the diver, a man who drowned enemies slowly, taking from them the light by degrees, making death into a lesson of control. "You will stop him," the abbot said. "Do not return until it's finished." The phrasing had neither cruelty nor exultation. It was simply a charge. Zhao Ren bowed, and for the first time in years something stirred that was not pain. There was a tight, keen thing that could be called resolve. The river, which had taken and corrupted so much in his life, would become the place where he would try to correct an old mistake. He left the monastery without looking back. The mercenary camp sat beside the same river. It felt like a deliberate theft, setting a place of violence where nature had once had its own law. Zhao Ren walked straight into the heart of it under dusk sky, his presence a black stone dropped into a still pond. Men were sharpening swords and tempering their voices with the commerce of brutality. He did not sneak. He did not plan small victories. He moved like a storm. Blades rang against his body. Metal bit flesh and cracked against muscle and bone that had been trained to take such bites. He did not dodge. He advanced. Each collision was a laboratory in which he tested his body again and again. He learned by absorbing. He crushed throats with forearms, smashed ribs until breath escaped in wet gasps. Men fell, the mercenaries who'd been trading in human craft and human souls. Screams and curses and the metallic twang of weapon against weapon formed a background for what he was doing. Some ran. Fear is fast. Regret is slower. At the edge of camp, by the water, the diver waited. He had the patience of a man who had watched water and seen how it buried things. He did not glance at Zhao Ren with triumph so much as with a flat constancy. When he removed his hood, it was the face he had once gripped in training that looked back, way older and scarred, with eyes that read like emptied wells. The reveal was a kind of silence that filled everything. No theatrics. Just recognition and a long, cold patience. The truth arrived like cold water. Wei had survived. The river had taught him how. The river had taught him to hold breath until the world blurred and to make people fear the moment before they were plunged under. He had learned tactics and cruelty and a business that traded in pain. He had become the diver. Zhao Ren felt nothing at first. A stone-like thing had replaced many feelings. Then, below the skull's hollow, his knees went weak. The room of his memory filled every inch and there was no law that could sort it. They fought without shouting. Their bodies were instruments that remembered techniques and betrayals. Iron body against flowing counters. Zhao Ren's deliberate shutdown of sensation against Wei's rediscovered grace. Wei struck the pressure points Zhao Ren had never thought to guard. Dewy nerves went numb and limbs betrayed balance. Zhao Ren adapted. The river remained the patient witness. From edge to surface, it watched their bodies carve water and air. The stakes felt older than the men. Wei wanted to prove a survival. Zhao Ren wanted atonement. They gave one another exactly what they had brought to the place. In the end, Wei dragged Zhao Ren into the river. Water closed over them like a judge and a jury. Cold seized Zhao Ren's lungs. The iron cloak that had once seemed impenetrable mattered less than breath. Underwater, metal and muscle felt like a failing solidarity. The diver whispered, and the whisper became an accusation. Iron sinks. Zhao Ren grabbed Wei. This time there was no hesitation that could become habit. He did not let go. The two of them went under together, tangled like two roots that do not want to be separated. Air abandoned them both. The world narrowed to a single point where nothing familiar remained. They fought beneath the skin of the river, breaking and holding and pleading in a language of limbs. When they broke the surface, one pushed through and the other did not. By morning, the river delivered only one body downstream. It carried Wei away like it had carried his past, like it had learned to carry away consequence. Zhao Ren crawled onto the bank, coughing up a mixture of river water and blood. He laughed once, an unexpected, raw sound that had nothing saintly in it. It was a laugh of disbelief and relief braided together. Then he collapsed. Days later, the monastery found Zhao Ren's body near the river. They recognized the work of his life. Skin hardened, bones intact, lung tissue bearing the water's mark. He had done what the abbot asked. He had faced the man who had become the river's child and he had come out of the struggle with a body that was a ledger of all that had happened. The abbot watched the scene with the same unhurried face, as if he had known all along how the river would decide. Iron had not saved Zhao Ren. The training that had made him a fortress of flesh had not been able to keep breath in the face of water. The truth is simpler and colder. Some forces test more than muscle. Forgiveness, in Zhao Ren's life, had never been a feasible currency. He had not been hired away from his past to learn mercy. He had been tasked to stop a corruption and, in doing so, had paid in a way he had already been preparing to pay. There is an odd, human clarity in the aftermath. The monks carried what could be carried and laid Zhao Ren to rest with the rights of men who have both hurt and been hurt by the world. The river flowed on, indifferent and constant. It had kept one secret and returned one body. It had taught a lesson about the limits of transformation and the stubbornness of consequence. If there is a moral here, it is not tidy. The story refuses a single neat summation. It dwells instead on the angles where intent and action do not align. Where training and memory and mercy make claims on one life at once, and where the cold law of nature simply keeps following its course. Zhao Ren had turned himself into an instrument to fix a wrong. He had traded the soft filaments of ordinary life for a hardened edge. That edge, in the end, cut both of them. This narrative leaves a quiet question dangling in the air like mist. How do we carry what we could not save? Zhao Ren carried it on his skin and in his method until something else, a direct, violent call to correction, demanded payment. The abbot's order, the mercenary greed, the river's appetite. They were parts of a world that makes choices in quiet and loud ways. And the human animals living inside that world keep responding in the only ways they know how. The river keeps flowing. The cliffs keep watching. In that steady repetition, there is a kind of lesson that is not moralizing. It is the recognition that some violences are cyclical and feed on the wounds we do not tend, and that sometimes the cost of breaking a cycle is exact. Zhao Ren paid it. The river taught him, ultimately, that iron will not change what water has learned to do. The monastery put his body to rest. The tide of the valley resumed its work, swallowing, carrying, teaching its own harsh, indifferent lessons in a language of current and weight. The end of this story is not a closure where every loose string is tied. It is instead a quiet shore where a man's life meets the elements that framed it. It is a place where training and guilt, love and punishment, intention and consequence gather like stones, and where the river goes on, patient and unrelenting, in the business it has always known best.